Have you ever walked out of a conversation feeling like something was off? Like you missed some crucial cue?
I know that feeling.
Well, today we're going to dive deep into the world of reading people, deciphering those unspoken signals, those silent messages we send each other.
It sounds fascinating.
It is, and you sent over the most incredible audiobook on this, and it covers it all. Historical perspectives, the power of micro-expressions.
It really delves into how much we communicate without even realizing it. Our bodies, faces, tone of voice, it all paints a picture.
Yeah, and our expert here today, well, they literally wrote the book on it. So by the end of this, you'll be on your way to becoming a human lie detector.
Hmm.
But maybe use your powers for good, okay?
Years of research have shown me one thing for sure. We are constantly communicating even when we don't mean to.
And the audiobook actually digs into that history. This isn't just some new age trend, the study of body language. It's rooted in serious science. It goes all the way back to early psychological research.
Oh, absolutely. Even ancient civilizations were tuned into this. Think about the Egyptians with their hieroglyphics.
Right.
Those weren't just symbols. They often incorporated gestures, like full stories told through a mix of visuals and body language.
Wow.
And in ancient Greece, skilled orators used gestures as a key part of persuasive speeches.
So this idea that we speak with our bodies, it's not new at all. It's fascinating to think what they understood back then that, maybe we've lost touch with.
Yeah.
So when did this become like a formal area of study?
Well, the formal study really took off in the early 20th century. You have people like Charles Darwin, believe it or not, he wrote about the universality of facial expressions. But the real game changer, I'd say, was Paul Ekman's research back in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, Ekman. That name rings a bell.
He's the one who really categorized those facial expressions that are basically universal, across cultures, I mean. Happiness, sadness, anger, they're expressed in the same way whether you're in New York or Nepal.
So even if you don't speak the language, you can still understand someone's basic emotions just by looking at their face. That's so helpful. Travel, business, even just navigating, family gatherings.
Okay, absolutely.
But Ekman, he didn't stop there, right? He also delved into something called micro-expressions.
Exactly. Microexpressions, those are those super quick, involuntary movements of the face.
Oh, wow.
They happen in a fraction of a second, and they can reveal a person's true feelings, even if they're trying to, mask them.
So basically, our faces are betraying us even when we think we have a poker face on.
Exactly.
No wonder they say the eyes are the window to the soul. Can you imagine being able to spot these in like a high-stakes negotiation?
Oh, absolutely. Think of a poker game, for example.
Yeah.
Even if you're trying to stay neutral, a skilled observer might catch a microexpression, say, of disappointment when you get dealt a bad hand.
So it's that little flash of genuine reaction,
Exactly.
even if you manage to, keep your cool on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, so our face is definitely a giveaway. The audiobook also talks about how much our body language reveals, specifically posture.
Oh, posture is huge. Open posture, arms and legs uncrossed, that generally signals comfort and openness. But a closed posture can indicate discomfort, defensiveness, maybe even resistance.
Like our bodies are broadcasting how comfortable we are, whether we want them to or not. It reminds me, I had this job interview once. I was so nervous I spent the whole time slouching and fidgeting. Must have been sending off all the wrong signals. Needless to say, I didn't get the job.
That's such a good example of how body language can really speak volumes, even sabotage us without us realizing it. In a professional setting, an upright posture, shoulders back, head held high projects confidence and authority, and it really makes a difference.
It's about being mindful of how we present ourselves physically, because it impacts how others perceive us, and in turn, how the interaction goes. It's like we're all in this nonverbal dance. What about gestures? Are they as universally understood as some of those facial expressions?
Gestures are definitely key. Even small hand movements can convey information. A thumbs up, that's pretty universal, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Gestures can also vary between cultures, so what's polite in one place might be totally offensive in another.
Oh, tell me about it. I learned that the hard way once while traveling. Made a gesture that was deeply offensive in that culture. Talk about a crash course.
That's why it's so important to be aware of cultural differences.
Yeah.
Do a little research before traveling or interacting with people from different backgrounds. It can prevent those misunderstandings.
Absolutely. So we've talked about posture, gestures, the complexities of cultural variations.
Yeah.
But the audiobook also stresses paying attention to what's not being said. Those moments where someone's words and their body language, they don't quite match up.
Ah, yes. That incongruence is a major red flag. They might say they're fine, but their body language is screaming stressed out. And those nonverbal cues become even more important.
Like that classic example, someone saying, I'm not mad, but their jaw is clenched and you can practically see the steam coming out of their ears.
Exactly. Their body language is telling a very different story.
So we're learning to be human lie detectors. But how can we be sure we're not misinterpreting right? Maybe someone's just having a bad day and it has nothing to do with deception.
That's a really important point. No single cue definitively means someone is lying. It's about looking for clusters of signals, inconsistencies in their body language, their tone of voice, what they're saying, and analyzing those in the context of the situation.
It's like putting together a puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Those little clues, and you're trying to see the bigger picture.
Precisely.
And that's where emotional intelligence comes in, right? It's not just reading other people's emotions, but also understanding and even managing our own.
Exactly. If we're feeling anxious or suspicious, we might misinterpret perfectly innocent behavior. Emotional intelligence helps us be aware of our own state, so it doesn't cloud our judgment when reading others. It's amazing, how intertwined our emotions and our perceptions are. Like we're constantly looking at things through this lens of how we're feeling.
So EQ, emotional intelligence, right? It's not just some fluffy self-help concept. It's a real skill for navigating how we interact. But is it something we're born with? Or can we actually, get better at it over time?
That's the question, isn't it? The good news is, while some folks might be naturally more tuned into emotions, EQ, it's a skill you can develop, really strengthen it over time.
Okay, so how do we, work that EQ muscle? What are some exercises to boost our emotional intelligence?
Well, the bedrock, the foundation really, is self-awareness. It's paying attention to your own emotions, recognizing what sets them off.
So becoming more mindful of our internal world, basically.
Precisely. Start by simply noticing how you feel in different situations. What brings you joy? What makes you feel stressed? How do you typically react, to certain events?
I'm thinking journaling could be helpful for that. Just take a few minutes each day to reflect.
Journaling is a fantastic tool for self-awareness. You could also try meditation or mindfulness exercises. They can help you become more present, more aware of your emotions in the moment without judgment.
So we're training ourselves to be more aware of those emotions as they pop up, instead of letting them control us without us even realizing it. But what about when those emotions get really intense? That's where self-regulation comes in.
Absolutely. Self-regulation is all about managing those emotions in a healthy way so they don't, run the show. Instead of having a meltdown when things go sideways, you learn to take a breath, pause, and choose a better response.
Hitting that pause button before reacting.
Exactly. And with practice, that pause button gets easier and easier to press, even in those really tough situations. The more we practice self-regulation, the more resilient we become, better able to handle all the emotional ups and downs.
This is making me think of all the times I wish I'd hit that pause button. Okay, so we've got self-awareness, self-regulation, but what about understanding the emotions of other people? It can't be as simple as just deciding to be more empathetic.
You're right. Empathy is more than just good intentions. It's really putting yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding their perspective, even feeling what they might be feeling. It takes effort, a real effort, to listen carefully, observe their nonverbal cues, ask questions that show you're interested.
Being present in the moment, really engaged with the other person, not just waiting for our turn to talk.
Active listening. It's crucial for empathy. It's about putting your own thoughts, your own judgments aside, and truly focusing on what the other person's communicating, both verbally and nonverbally.
Wow, it makes me realize how much I've been missing. It's like we're trained to focus on our own thoughts and responses, rather than really tuning in to the other person.
It's common in our fast-paced world, but with practice, we can shift that focus, cultivate a deeper sense of empathy, and as we strengthen those empathy muscles, our relationships, they transform.
Sounds like these skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy, they create a ripple effect. They don't just impact us, but our relationships too. Amazing how interconnected it all is.
It really is. And that's where the magic happens. When we understand and manage our own emotions and connect with others empathetically, we're building the foundation for really authentic, really fulfilling relationships.
It's not just about analyzing people, for the sake of it. It's about using that understanding to build deeper connections. But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
Especially in those everyday moments that make up our relationships.
One way is to become an emotional detective of sorts. Pay attention to how these dynamics play out in your everyday life. Notice how you feel around certain people or in specific situations? What triggers those feelings? What can you learn about yourself and others from those observations?
It's like we're turning everyday life into this, like, emotional intelligence training ground.
In a way, yes.
But just observing, that's only the first step, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually use those emotional intelligence skills, especially with the people we're closest to?
Well, one powerful tool, we touched on it earlier, is active listening. It's about truly focusing on what the other person's saying, both their words and their body language, without interrupting or jumping in to, offer solutions.
So being present, giving them space to express themselves without judgment. Sounds simple, but I imagine it takes practice.
It does. It's about shifting that focus from thinking about our response to really absorbing what they're saying. One technique that can help is reflecting back what you've heard. So instead of just, or okay, try paraphrasing. You might say, it sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed right now, or I hear you saying you're frustrated.
That makes sense. It shows you're not just hearing the words, but actually trying to grasp their perspective.
Yeah.
What about asking questions? Is there a way to do that without making it feel like, an interrogation?
Asking clarifying questions is a great way to show you're engaged, you want to understand. But the key is they have to be genuine. Genuine attempts to get clarity, not leading questions or, subtle digs.
So instead of assuming we know what they mean,
Hmm.
we check in, make sure we're on the same page, creating that space for open communication.
Yeah.
But what about our emotions? Is it always good to be totally open, even if we're feeling, say, angry or frustrated?
Honesty is important, but so is expressing our emotions in a way that builds things up, not tears them down. Remember that self-regulation muscle?
Right.
Sometimes we need to hit pause before reacting, especially if we're heated.
That pause can prevent a lot of regret. But when we do communicate our feelings, how can we do it in a way that strengthens the relationship, not creates more conflict?
One tip, use I statements instead of you statements. Yeah. So instead of, you're always making me late, you could say, I feel stressed and anxious when we're running behind schedule.
It's subtle, but I see how it makes a difference. It's more about sharing your experience, not blaming.
Exactly.
What about those times when, communication breaks down? We just can't see eye to eye. Does emotional intelligence have anything to offer for those moments?
One of the best ways to strengthen relationships, especially when things are tough, is to create shared experiences. Could be anything from cooking a meal together to, taking a trip, volunteering for a cause you both care about.
Building that shared history, those positive memories.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be something grand. Even simple things like taking a walk together or watching a movie. It's about making time for each other, showing up, being present.
It reminds me of that saying, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And emotional intelligence, it seems like that's the key to creating those positive feelings that really nourish our relationships.
That's beautiful. And remember, relationships are a two-way street. It's not just what we give, but also what we're willing to receive. Be open to the love and support that others offer.
That's such an important reminder. We can get so caught up in giving that we forget to let ourselves receive. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new understanding of relationships and actual tools to build stronger connections.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's all about practice, patience, and that willingness to learn and grow. The journey itself is really rewarding.
Absolutely. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into reading people and building emotional intelligence. Keep observing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep connecting. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that's sure to expand your mind and enrich your life.